and everyone. This is our 440 Artist Talk. I'm James Acevedo, and today we're featuring Ellen Chuse in her solo show, Through the Looking Glass. And we're also pleased to have in the project space Scapes with Fred Bendheim, Karen Gibbons, and Catherine Orrok. These are the shows that are currently on exhibition at the 440 Gallery through Sunday, May the 21st. And we'll see some highlights of the show that now should be got some installation shots. This is Ellen's show, which I'm sure you've already seen, but if you haven't, definitely you need to get to this and see this in person. We'll be emphasizing that. And you can see there's a long line, visitors waiting, really bringing in the crowd from the neighborhood.
James, if you could just admit David, I can't do it right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, let me hide this. Go.
Great, thanks.
We see a selection of the work. And, you know, for our artist talk, we'll be speaking with the artists. Once the artists have spoken, we'll have a discussion period afterwards, but please feel free to either place your questions or comments in the chat, and then after the artist has spoken, we'll have a discussion period. The opening reception. I think that was the day that it was supposed to rain. It was a kind of gray day.
Yeah, it was also Earth Day. We had a lot
Yep.
of competition, but we still had a good turnout.
I'm just going to stop for a moment so I can mute myself. So I have some
Okay.
background noise.
We checked out. Yeah, nobody's waiting to get in. Okay, we're good. And that was a big opening. Back in the project space. There's Ellen. And just as a reminder that as the artists are speaking, we ask that that you mute yourself or just watch out for any noises in the background. So now turning to images from Ellen's show, and Ellen, congratulations on your 8th solo show at 440 Gallery.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let's begin with the title, Through the Looking Glass, and how you chose this, and wish the viewer to understand the context and the reference to the titles of the works.
Well, just to say that although I'm using the title Through the Looking Glass, the show is not about Alice in Wonderland, but that's an expression which I feel symbolizes moving into the unknown. And what I love about it is it's both specific enough in our culture and also somewhat ambiguous. And so that I always like that in my work, that it can really be, it can be taken in many different ways. And these are forms, I mean, some years ago, I began making intensely dark images. And initially they felt, even to me, they felt kind of ominous and frightening, but eventually they morphed into meditations really on form and color. And these pared down forms have become my looking glass. They're like portals that have carried me into new places and into uncharted places. And so the forms, I mean, it can be a void, it could be a solid. That's really up to the viewer. I see them as portals, as ways of moving through and into something, and that they're an invitation. Although some of my more recent work, the shields can feel like an obstruction, but there's always a way to move through and into the next form. And I think that's also really the beauty of abstract symbolic form, in that the meaning will vary from one person to another, from one culture to another. And the forms I create, I hope they contain an inherent mystery, an ambiguity of meaning that I find exciting. And they're also part of my ongoing spiritual journey as an artist, and as well as reflections on aging and intimations of mortality, but just light stuff like that. So that's a kind of long answer to the question. But it seemed like a powerful title, and it is the title of the first piece in the show, and that is also the that's the initial piece, the oldest piece in the show. It goes back to 2021.
Mhm. Well, I think the show is beautifully presented. And one thing, though, I find interesting is how framed and unframed work is mixed. Last week when I was in the gallery, a viewer actually stood in front of one of the unframed works and said, "Oh, I love the unframed work." And I wondered how you feel about that. Do you have a preference for the presentation?
Well, in a perfect world, the work could remain unframed. Without the frames, you can really see the texture, you can almost feel the texture of the paint and the paper and the color. There's nothing between you and the form and the color. And I love paper. I painted, when I first started painting, I started painting on paper because paper was familiar to me. And then I moved to canvas and board, but I came back to paper because I really, really love it. And what that means is that eventually, for archival reasons, that my paintings need to be framed. I've had a few shows, especially at 440, where the paintings were unframed, and especially if the work is very large. It's not realistic to frame it unless the collector frames it. And in this show, I thought, I thought it would be interesting to show framed and unframed work together, but also some of the work was newer work, and I finished it right before we hung the show. So that really made it essential. And I think thanks to the installation crew, and especially Karen Gibbons, we found a way to integrate that so that people could experience it in both directions. People really want to touch it, and I don't blame them. I once said that I wanted to make a painting that you wanted to eat. So I don't know, maybe that's part of it. 440 is a very protected space, so I feel really comfortable having a unprotected work there. But if I'm sending work out to other shows, or they're going to be in environments where there isn't always someone sitting and watching them, then I really feel like they have to have protection.
I'm also fascinated by the contrast that occurs between Sentinel and the other works, such as the shields and the portals. And the Sentinel being well, as I interpret, a figure. And I just wonder how you feel about that. As an abstract artist, would you object to someone saying, "Oh, that's obviously a figure"? What are
Not
your
at
views
all.
on that?
Not at all, because it's a very abstracted figure.
Uh,
I always like to make a large piece, sometimes more than one large piece for the gallery. You know, it's fun to have a place to put a really large piece where people are going to see it. And Sentinel really emerged from a very small drawing that I had made a few years ago. And in some ways, I mean, I think of it as a she. She's definitely a figure of some sort. And in some ways, she relates more to my previous show at 440 called The Great Mystery, which focused on archetypal Venus, fertility figures, interpreted in a very abstract way, of course. And when I began this painting, Sentinel, I mean, sometimes the name comes to me when I'm working on it. Sometimes it comes later. I had just seen the Tudor show at the Met. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but I was so struck by the queens. They were just encased in gowns and headdresses and jewelry in a way that it was so elaborate, and it felt like they were in armor, and it contained them. It became completely abstract. The person herself kind of disappeared, and she was an abstract form. So I think I was kind of channeling that. I think that's what that little headdress is up there. But initially I was really concerned, as Karen can tell you. I brought it not even knowing if I would hang it in the current show. I didn't think that it fit with the other work. But now I kind of think of her as a goddess, sort of keeping watch over everything in the show. So yes, she's very much a figure, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Because I mean, the forms I use are organic forms. They exist in nature. I've always seen the body as landscape, and landscape is the body. And so it goes back and forth for me.
And it's interesting about the Tudor reference that now that you say that, looking at the figure, it has a kind of regal. I see a regal effect or
Yes, yes, she's clearly,
presence.
she's
Yes.
taking up a lot of space.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love the blue. I love the blue on that.
Thank you.
And I know you've mentioned your background as a sculptor. I'm curious if there might be a sculpture show in the works, or just in general, where do you see your work headed?
Well, it's interesting. Yes, I have started to talk about the relationship of the paintings to sculpture, realizing that I'm really a sculptor who's making paintings, and that I'm not a painterly painter. One of my daughters saw the connection between the sculpture from the 1970s and the paintings that I've been doing recently. She saw it before I did, and now I see it, and I really feel it very viscerally, because in both, there's always been an emphasis on line and edge and the simplicity of the abstract forms. The clay work that is more lyrical is very much like the drawings and paintings that I've done of plant forms. So there's definitely a connection. I work very intuitively. I know where I begin, but I never have any idea where I'm going to end up. And so consequently, I often figure out what I'm doing after the fact. It comes later to see what has happened and to see that connection. And I have thought of having a show, including some of the sculpture of that period, along with some related paintings. 440 is a very small gallery, and I wanted to use it to show new work this year, but the idea is definitely percolating, and I think that I would like to do that. So for now, in terms of what I'm going to do next, I think I'd like to make some more lyrical charcoal drawings for a change, just a little change of pace, and kind of get out of the sort of some of the heaviness of the paintings for me. But I don't know what's going to happen until I start working. And these forms, every time I think I'm done with them, they just pull me back. So that's the best. I don't know exactly what's going to happen next, but something. So,
Well, thank you very much.
thank you. Great questions.
wonderful show.
James.
Just as a reminder, this is on display through Sunday, May the 21st. And there will be a closing event on that Sunday from 2 to 4. There will be a closing reception. So if you've missed actually going to the gallery, maybe that's a great time to go. And then that's also the day that the 440 Gallery has their music event, Me, Myself, and I, that will follow at 4:40 until 6. So it could be an entire afternoon at the gallery. So now we can turn to our project space, Scapes, works by Fred Bendheim, Catherine Gibbons, and Catherine Orrok.
Karen Gibbons.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen Gibbons and Catherine Orrok. Thank you, Fred. And I think we'll cycle through the installation. It's Catherine's work. A view above the flat files. The actual work of creating the show or installing the show with our talented installation crew. So Fred, congratulations. Pleasure to see these vibrant tondos in Shapescapes. I had a question about in the press release, they're described as being cut from PVC board. Could you expand a bit on that description about the process of making these works?
Oh, thanks, James. Yeah, they are made from a single board. I used to make these out of wood, and then I realized it was a lot of work to get rid of the grain, which I didn't want the grain. I just wanted the flat shapes. So I started using PVC board. It works a lot like wood. The process, I do a lot of drawing, really. Sometimes I'll just draw and then they stay as drawings, and other times I'll turn them into these more three-dimensional pieces. And I'll often make a maquette from a drawing out of cardboard. Sometimes I'll do that as an intermediary. But yeah, they're pretty time-consuming. These, drawing and then carving them out of the board, and a lot of filing and sanding. It's very kind of labor-intensive. I guess, I don't know if I wouldn't say I enjoy that part of it, but I just do it, because that's the way I want it to look a certain way. It'd be nice to have like an assistant or someone doing all that hard work. So if anyone wants to volunteer, let me know. Yeah, so that's the process. Then painting, yeah, a lot of masking. They're painted on the inside too. So they're three-dimensional.
Well, I find the color schemes to be extremely rich, vibrant, but very mellow. And I'm curious about your mixing the color. Your color is very personal and somewhat unexpected. How do you go about choosing color? It's
intuitive. Yeah, it's just I start with I look at the shapes. So I look at one shape and then I think what color that just sort of feels like to me, what that color feels like to me, that shape. And then once I have that first color, then it's a matter of balancing out the other colors so that each all the shapes are you can sort of read them as separate. And then I do that, translucent effect, like they're translucent or transparent, really. So you see the combination of the colors as if they were, transparent, but they're not. That's an illusion.
Oh, and that transparency is by and I think especially in a picture like that, we can see it's mixed color as opposed to layered color.
Right.
It's not like glazes. Yeah.
No, they're not glazes, right? I mix them on the palette and then apply them. Yeah, mask all the areas.
Yeah, that's really magical, I think.
Thanks.
I know from other shows that your work, that shape is a very important part of your work, compositionally, in 3D. However, this shape, the round shape, the tondo shape, do you see that as particular significant for your work?
Well, I've been doing a lot of curves, a lot of curved shapes, and so they just seem to work as a circular format. And then they're also sort of references to the sky, like that. The red, for instance, there, you could look at that as a constellation, perhaps, like the way they connect the stars in a constellation map. And then, so the circle can refer to, like heaven or sky. When you look up at the sky, it's a circle. You see the horizon line, as in a circular fashion when you look up. And so I see them as referring more to the heaven or the ideal, versus the practical earthbound practicality.
Well, they're very beautiful.
Thank
you very much for sharing that. We can now turn to the work of Karen Gibbons.
That's not Karen's.
Karen, congratulations on these very evocative works.
Thank you.
I'm always moved by your work and the theme about that, as I think I quote you, that we are not separate from nature as the important theme in your work. And I've seen how your work uses found objects and materials. As an artist who also uses found materials, I'm curious about your process and how these objects are chosen.
Thanks, James. That's a great question. Because they're chosen pretty intuitively, but I also have a long history of finding and incorporating found materials in my work. So I think in undergraduate, I was a painter. I went to school to be a painter. And by the time I was in grad school, I was incorporating sculptural elements. And then for quite a while, I was a sculptor with a painterly sensibility. So I would start with a found object that would be my inspiration for then creating a painted sculpture that kind of had a skin over it, so that the found object would be the armature that would kind of poke through the skin to see, to have some reference to it, but not be completely the found object. So in other words, it's kind of deeply intuitive, and I feel like I need to have an intuitive in for my work, because if I work, let's say representationally, like if I chose to draw the elements that I want to be realistic in the work, it quickly becomes kind of mannered or just stale, and that maybe it becomes too self-conscious, maybe because it just loses its liveliness. When I choose an image because it has a certain evocative thing for me, and also the images become found, some of the materials become found, and I'm not just going to use any old thing. It has to be something that has some resonance for me, and then as I incorporate it, I'm hoping that it also has resonance for the viewer in whatever way they see it. So it may not be the same thing that I'm thinking of when I, like for the years that I kept these images of ants, maybe even my relationship to that image has changed, but I've kept them because, and I keep a whole box full of images that might at some time work with what is coming together for me. So like you said, the subject is kind of broadly my relationship with nature, or our inseparable nature relationship, and then it comes out in all different ways. But I was also thinking a little further that idea that that I need to like let things flow because they're found is kind of a resistance of authority. Like if I'm just painting abstractly, and I think I have an abstract sensibility in creating the work, but if I sometimes think like, why don't I just make an abstract painting? That would be so much easier. But then I end up like sort of modeling it after somebody or some, school of thought. And for me, then it goes dead because it's not, that it loses some kind of freshness. And well, that's enough said. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, and also about the symbols that are on. Well, I think most of the works. I'm curious if those are. Do you see those as like, like you're thinking about the piece, and that symbol, which is also a shape, is there from the start, or does that come almost, say, at the end? It's like a marking, almost like I don't know, a signature, or how does that work?
Well, I'm kind of thinking in terms of layers,
Mhm.
and again, working intuitively with what's the elements that I'm assembling. Sometimes it seems that I need that final layer of mark making, and maybe because my working method started with mark making. And so if I'm creating just a collage or collaging sculptural elements, once I start making a mark on top of it, then it all comes together. And usually they end up, like, every element has some kind of symbolic reference to it. And even the colors do for me too. And I sometimes hesitate to say what I consider symbolism, because like I started using eagle images before I researched what the litany of things that eagles might symbolize. But sometimes I do like check in, like, okay, let me see, is this really what I'm like trying to say here? And usually it is. And but then, like, the orange for me symbolizes caution. And then there's the geometry as well, that at some point I realized is referencing sacred geometry, which turns out to be perfect when I kind of looked into it, like, should I really call it sacred geometry? Because I'm always concerned with the mind, body, spirit aspect of what I'm doing. And so the idea of sacred geometry is just simply that these forms in nature, like all these shapes, come ready-made in nature somewhere, like they're embedded in nature, and how the universe expands, or how a shell unfolds, or how a tree grows, that they have these elements of geometry. And then the circle, to me, is so resonant because it has many symbolic references, and of course it's the most resonant when just the feeling of the shape has all those references embedded in it. So the circle is very rich for me.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's interesting also, Fred made the reference to the circle and the heavens, the sky, which is also in your work. But I was just looking at the smaller piece, the one on the blocks of wood, of how the circle there is our Earth. It's this play going. It's really, it could be almost anything, or it is everything. It's both a portal as well as an object. It's very evocative. Also, I thought that your work is particularly to the scape side of the title of the show. I see scapes, landscapes, which are quite magical in your work. And I had a question about how the images you use. I know that some of them are found, but I also wondered if you use your own photographs, if you take your own photographs.
Yes, actually. And I take a lot of photos, and at times taking the photos as their own art piece, their own thing. And then sometimes those pieces become sort of resonant for me, that I want to keep repeating them. So I'll use my own images mixed in with found images. And by the way, I always use a copier to give them that like step away from the finished piece. And also because then I use acrylic medium that kind of dissolves the ink just enough that it starts to move around a little bit. So there's that element of chance in there, and it makes it more painterly and more available to kind of keep everything integrated. But what I wanted to say about the scape part of it is that that I often think of my work as being both landscape and portrait, and that almost any piece that I do has some element of self-portraiture because it's reflecting some aspect of my psyche or my worldview. And at the same time, I'm really interested in nature and what I learned from recording a podcast I was listening to by a shaman who goes by Angel Deer, was talking about our inherent creatureness. So that the idea that we're inextricably part of this creature that is Gaia, the earth, and that where we've gone wrong with global warming correction and everything is that we keep seeing ourselves as opposed to Earth, or as somebody who imposes things on the Earth, or uses it as our toolbox or whatever, when we're actually creatures. And when we can tap into our creatureness, then we naturally have this compassion for all the creatures, including the earth, if that makes sense. So that's really interesting to me as subject matter. And just one other thing I'll say is that I've realized when we were talking earlier about the circle and the square, and how the square is kind of human and grounded, and the circle is kind of like the heavens and the idea of the divine. And so I've been drawn to using square format birch panels, and then I assemble them and they become scapes, or they become but just by themselves, or pairs, or I think the one piece, Susan, if you want to move to the one with the ants, that's 3 panels that are square. So I assemble them into scapes. They can also exist on their own as this kind of human oriented square, which is, our art making in general. So, and I like the idea that they could be formed in different ways too. And the square is, infinitely able to attach in different ways, or at least not infinite, 4 different ways. Depends exponentially how many squares you have, but so that's my thought about that.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Turning to Catherine's work. Let's see. Catherine, I know from previous shows, you've shown paintings that are in the square, and or square paintings, square format, and I've said that to me this is your signatory shape, and I wanted to ask the question: what draws you to this particular shape, and does it have any personal symbolism or meaning? Though I don't want to imply that you can only make squares. But I think you're very successful at making square paintings, so that's why I call them signatory. But,
yes, thank you, James. Yeah, well, I've used the square format for quite a while, and I am drawn to it for a number of reasons, but not really the same kind of personal reasons that I think Karen and Fred have to their use of shapes. I'm drawn to it because, well, it is a very powerful shape, like the circle. It's elemental almost. But I kind of look at it in reference to the history of painting. I see associations with modernism. If you think about some great leaps in exploring painting, and I think of people like Joseph Alber's Homage to the Square, and what he's doing is really examining perception. So that's kind of what I'm doing. My paintings are really abstract. They are not abstracted from anything. So I work with color and form, and there's something very pure about working in the square format. So there's references to modernism, references to the grid, which is we bow down. Modernism bowed down to the grid, making those flat surfaces, and but what I'm trying to do is kind of warp the grid. I want to play with it. I want to say it's not utopian. It's not like, the Russian supremacists who, thought about making these pure paintings with a kind of utopian thought. That's I don't know that anybody believes in utopias anymore. So I want to that's one of the reasons that I'm drawn to the square, because it has a lot of references, and you can look at it from many different angles. So I love the power of the shape, but I'm also interested in exploring other formats, because the format itself of a painting, how it sits in the world, that's how you experience it. It's square, it's rectangle, it's round, and then there are the edges. This is an object that sits in the world. So that's kind of where I am with that.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the perceptual, and that is something that I had mentioned earlier, that when I was in the gallery, and how with the paintings that are called the wedge paintings,
Mhm.
which are these blocks of wood, fairly thick, with painted on. From the corner of my eye, I kept perceiving these as cubes, which of course, you look at a block from the side, and you can see a cube. And I wondered if there is an interest in perceptual work, or as actually moving into the third dimension, in exploring both painting and the third dimension, sculpture, if that's something that is an interest to you.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if I would actually think of them as sculptures, but I guess you could. They are, there is a very objectness to them, because they're, if they were gigantic paintings and they were, through, an inch and a quarter in depth, you wouldn't think anything of it. But the fact that they're tiny, they're only 4 inches or 6 inches, or I think maybe one is 8 inches. That kind of depth does turn them into block-like objects. So then you become, I think, very aware of how this thing sits in the world. It's a thing, but also there is the surface, the paint, your perceptions, how you see the color. So there is a kind of little dichotomy there. And also, I think the edges, I've been painting the edges the same Prussian blue that runs in the lines that go through the paintings. So it is playing with that depth, the surface, their relationship, and so forth. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. I find that exciting, because when I saw, and it's funny how sometimes small work can do this. When I saw the small works, I began to look into your paintings a little differently. I suddenly saw the planes as I entered into a different space. So
yeah,
I thought that was very successful.
it's very much about space and how we and how we perceive things. It's really kind of anti that modernist trope of the flat surface and the paint on the canvas and it's flat. They are flat. My surfaces are not meant to be read as as any kind of realist space, but your eyes will do things because of the color, because of certain angles, and I find that really interesting. But you really have to look. So that's kind of what I'm after in my work. It's like the slow looking, spend some time, and that they're made objects, and they ask for your attention.
As a final question, with Scapes, I was certainly each artist is bringing quite a different approach or understanding or relationship to shape in the work. I wonder, from your perspective, how, well, I'm just curious how that came about in the discussions. And what if you've drawn any new conclusions or have any conclusions about how the show is presenting this this element, this graphical element or artistic element.
Yeah, it's it was a really interesting thing to come, you know, because the work that is presented, all our work is quite different, and yet you realize the primacy of those elemental shapes, the circle and the square in all of our work. So even though the things are associations, I think are very different. It seems like a great way to tie it all together, and also to think about how we think about shapes. You know, I after, you know, working with Karen and Fred and deciding how we're going to, which pieces we were going to show, talking about our work, it gives me more insight into, you know, how my shapes too, because people do make associations, personal associations, even if that's not your starting point. There's, of course, long history of these very basic and elemental shapes. And I have to say, I also want to thank the hanging committee, because hanging a lot of little works is a great challenge, and I think they did a very nice job, and I was very pleased to see how they all hung together, as well as the whole project room show. I think looked really good.
I think we had made earlier remarks on how the two shows, the solo show and the project show, really mesh this month. Particularly, I know that these shows always kind of come together.
Yes, I agree. It was yes, a very nice. It's a very nice experience to walk into the gallery and walk through the Ellen show and then lead into the project room. So anybody who hasn't seen it, it's a very satisfying experience.
Definitely, yes. So I do want to congratulate all the artists, Ellen, Fred, Karen, Catherine. Just looking over some of the comments that have been made. Ellen said about Fred's work, extraordinary craftsmanship. And I agree very much.
Well, when Fred said that he wanted a studio assistant, I don't think you would be happy, Fred. It would be very hard to get somebody who would meet your level of craftsmanship, and they are extraordinary. I mean, the layers of thought about form, shape, color, all of that's quite intimidating, I have to say.
Oh, well, thanks. I certainly don't see myself as a crafts person. It's just like I want a certain shape, and that's the way I have to do it. But
Yeah, well,
I'd rather have someone else do that. It's like I'm getting too old for all this work.
Yes.
Well, you know, earlier I had asked about, I had used the word improvised, Fred, and asked, and the reason for that is that in looking at your work, I was looking at the edges. I can see that it's not like the sense is that these are, a machine has created these. You really get the feeling that a hand has made these, you know, a hand that might move and respond to just something personal. And that's also reinforced with the color. They're very you know, they're not machine-like. They're very warm. They're very like human. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. They're very human, like,
Well, thanks. Yeah, that's even been applied to me sometimes, that adjective.
and Ellen also adds about Catherine's work. The squares are so human, and I think this applies to all our work. And a bit messy in the best sense of the word. Definitely not utopian. Yeah, utopian is
going
not.
back
It's no
to-
longer the style, right?
They're very, very human in
Mm.
that way. And that's what I think makes them so interesting, because they kind of present as though, but then it's so clearly not. I mean, your hand is there.
That, yes, applying the
Yeah.
paint, you need to see how they're made.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting topic. I know you guys were talking about artificial intelligence earlier on before this meeting started, and I was reading how it's going to take over so many jobs that it can do. But one person was theorizing that that artists like what we do, our work will actually become more valued because it's handmade and not human. It's about human values. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you, Fred. Though it may be that the role of the assistant may become, the AI may serve your need for an artistic.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be fine. It'd
assistant.
be fine to use artificial intelligence
Yes.
as an art too. It's just another tool. But if it's just when it takes over the, when it starts telling you what to do,
Yes.
rather than the other way around, then
I don't think it will. Yeah,
problematic. Yeah.
it'll be more like, well, mix this color. I'll be back in 3 hours. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and Joy said to Fred, a Cohen. Who used the word cone? Is it Cohen or Cohen?
Go on.
Cohen.
Oh.
I'm not sure who.
That was Fred.
Oh, it was Fred. Oh,
Joy asked me what question I would like to be asked on social media. As I said, I'd like to be asked a koan, which I knew the answer to, because I don't know the answers to most of them. Oh, hardly any. They're very tricky, those koans.
But she said, tell us what it is,
What tell you what is?
a koan.
Oh, a koan is it's a question used in Zen Buddhism.
Mhm.
Like the most famous one is, what's the sound of one hand clapping?
Mm-hmm.
That's,
In other words, doesn't actually have an answer.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
no, they have answers, definitely.
And
But
do
you have to
them?
study for a
You have
long
the
time
answers?
before you get the answer.
It doesn't have a fixed answer, does it?
Yeah.
Is very much like art.
It
which
depends.
doesn't-
No, it's not a fixed answer. I think the answer depends on who's asking and who's answering.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there are answers that are appropriate for those circumstances, as far as I know.
But
Okay,
I
we'll
think
work on
that's
that.
what-
To provoke
what we-
thought, to provoke
That's
thought.
what
Yeah,
we've
it's
been talking
provoke,
about
yeah.
today. In
Yes.
each in our work.
Yeah, I mean, a good koan for artists is like, why do you make art?
Hmm.
I mean, how do you answer it? I mean, you can kind of answer it, but you can't really answer it. You just
No.
have to just
Keep
it's
doing
answered
it.
by doing it,
Yeah.
It's just,
You just
That's-
keep doing it.
Yeah.
Wow. So we did answer a koan.
We
Yeah.
did. There you go. Oh, who
Just
knew?
keep doing it.
The profundity. Yeah.
Further questions? Any questions from our viewers?
I actually have a question. I accidentally sent it to 440 Gallery instead of everyone, but I'll just say it out loud. Catherine and Ellen, after hearing you both speak about your use of color, I can see the relationship of the deep blues that you use, and I feel like they have profound depth in both cases, and I wonder if you two see them as related to one another.
Well, that's interesting because when Catherine was talking about it, I mean, I don't use that midnight or Prussian blue, but I don't use black. Those dark shapes are made of Jenkins green and cerulean blue layered usually. But yeah, that's very profound for me because that sort of allows you in. And as I was like, oh, wow, you're
Yeah.
in that same, it makes you look, you think you're looking at black, but you're not looking at black. And so you have to look, it just goes deeper. Anyway.
I don't know why I went with Prussian blue. I mean, I really don't have, it's an unanswered cone for me, Prussian blue, but it just, against the other colors, there's a great deal of contrast. So the line becomes very definite, and then wrapping it around, painting the sides, it was an intuitive thing. I mean, I think that, because I think for all of us, the process is so important that as you go through it, you make you discover things in the act of doing it. So especially color choices, it really is an intuitive kind of thing. And then sometimes they don't work. So you go back and you add color, put different one next to another color. But I have to say it's mostly intuitive, and I don't know that I can actually explain it.
No, I know. I mean, people always comment on the layering of the color that I do. And that comes from having no idea of what it's going to look like. And so I begin someplace and I'm like, no, that's not right. And then I add another color. No, that's not quite it. And so it just keeps going until somehow it comes to a place where it just feels like, yeah, that's what it
That's what it should
that's
be.
what I need. Exactly. And I cannot replicate it. I mean, I'm just an idiot with that. I've tried to start writing some things down, not an idiot, but I mean, I'm so used to working intuitively that I kind of balk at the idea of writing down something that I did, but it would be useful,
Except that, I heard a great quote, and I wish I could tell you who it was, who was the originator of the quote, but I heard it at a talk on gardens, but I think it's totally applicable to the making of art. And it was process. It's very simple, beautiful. Process saves us from the poverty of our intentions.
Oh, I love it.
I love
Thank
it.
you. That is wonderful.
Yeah,
That is
because we
wonderful.
have all these great ideas about, how we think this thing should be. And then we start working and it's like, you got to throw most of them out the window because there's something else that's happening. And
When I started Sentinel, there was someone came into the into my studio and they saw the little drawing that I was working from. And she said, yes, but it's different. What you have up there is different. And it was like, of course it's different. I'm working from a drawing that's this big and like, it has to change. You can't just make something bigger.
yeah, it's very hard.
It just dies. So you have to keep, you start where you think you want to be, and then you just have to adjust and adapt until whatever it is you're making and whatever scale.
Feels right.
I'm sure the little tiny ones are different for you than the larger.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you make something saying, wow, that's great. I want to make this, I want to do this bigger. Take this little idea that happened on this little time and I'm going to make it bigger. And it's, I don't know, it can't, it doesn't
dies.
work.
It dies.
does.
Exactly.
It's why I love drawing shows, drawings, preparatory drawings for big paintings. I always come away with feeling, the energy and the beauty within the preparatory drawings. And yes, there's this monumental painting, but I'll take the drawings.
Yes.
And drawing.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Susan.
Sorry. I just wanted to reiterate that the shows in the project space and Ellen's solo show, they really like knocked my socks off when I came into the studio the first time I saw them. I just, I don't know, the way color is used and the way shapes are explored, it just, it blew me away. And so I know that someone else had said this, but if there's any chance, the people who have not seen the show the shows in person, you really have to see them in up front and let them speak to you when you're standing right in front of them. There's nothing like that. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, I agree very much with that. And I think that's with Ellen's work. I spoke about the viewer that who was talking about the unframed work. I think that's what we're feeling with the unframed work. It's an intimacy with the material, but that the artist has created. It's very direct, and it's a really kind of, I'll use the word magical. Really, like you want to take that and touch it, and
Yes.
experience
Yeah.
it. It comes across, and yes, you have to be in the gallery to feel that.
I know my niece was there the other day. She said, I really want to touch it. I said,
Go ahead. Right.
nobody else can touch it, but you may touch it. Now, those surfaces, those are hardy surfaces. The work is not delicate. Let me put it that way. So, but generally, yeah, not touching is better.
Right.
I'm going to say that's something that we all have in common, that we're showing the work without glass in between.
Right?
And to me, it feels like part of what I want to convey is that sort of visceral, magical thing, for lack of a better word, of the process of
Yes.
making it. And so even Fred's, that, he's not as attached to the process because he would have AI do it for him.
Yeah, I would.
Still has fascination, like it's and a visceral thing. If you put a piece of glass there, it would be less interesting because you wouldn't really be able to perceive like the paint on the edges of the form and all the the feeling of
The making of
the
it.
surface. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see, any further comments? Maybe we should, we've gone about an hour, so maybe I should move to, well, certainly thank everyone, the artists and our audience. Thank you very much. Had a great discussion on this work, and thinking about our next exhibits. I'll repeat that this show will end on the 21st, and there will be a closing, and you can get that information on our website. We'll be also sending that out. But our next exhibit will open, let's see, May 25th, and that will be David Stock, Organized Chaos, Photographs, solo show. And in the project space, On the Way to Abstraction, works by Lee Blanchard, Amanda Michelle Brown, and Robin Roy. We're looking forward to that show, which will open on the 25th, but the reception is on the Saturday, the 27th, from 4 to 6. Then also, we are word about our annual theme show, Mapping, curated by Maddie Rosenberg. that's currently in the works. This is an open call with a deadline for Wednesday, May 10th. So if anyone has not or is wondering if they can still apply, there is time, and information is on the 440 website. And then also mention that the Benefit for Arts Gowanus is this Friday, the 12th, from 6 to 9:30 on at their at 336 3rd Street. And this is a benefit auction, and Ellen and Karen have donated works, and also Susan. So there will be, and I don't know, perhaps even other 440 artists, but certainly that is occurring this Friday. And then Fred had also mentioned that he has an open studio this Saturday. I'm sorry, not Saturday, May 20th, at his Industry City studio.
I just wanted to add about the patterns that if you buy a ticket, that's the Arts Gowanus Gala fundraiser. You get to take home a piece, and you also get to be part of the festivity by dressing in as outrageous a patterned ensemble as you dare. And I also wanted to thank James very much for his wonderful moderation today. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
James.
James.
Yes, thank you, James.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
I enjoy it.
I see Joy has something in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, Joy has a reception at Salmagundi Club on Thursday, May 25th from 6 to 8 p.m.
It's the members' annual show at Salmagundi.
Great, great.
Congratulations, Joy.
440 around town. We are
Mhm.
rocking it. And
And Joy, that's the Salmagundi Club on Fifth Avenue.
Fifth Avenue and 12th Street in Greenwich
Yeah.
Village. Yeah.
Good.
And David, we're looking forward to seeing your show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, if that's all, then thank you all.
Thank you.
for coming, and thank you for listening.
Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
everyone.
Hope to see
Bye-bye. Thank
hope to
you.
see
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.